Hello and welcome to the Recovery Report Live. This week I'll be your host. My name is Matt Sengsourinh, Senior Vice President of GlobalPro. Our good friend and host, Mr. Daniel Des, founder of GlobalPro, is off having a wonderful vacation, spending some time, some much needed time and quality time with his family. So we hope everyone's doing well. We miss you guys. See you back here when you get home. Wanted to start off by just saying real quickly, happy 4th of July. Happy Independence Day, everybody. We hope everyone had a great time. Barbecues, swimming pools. It was really, really a scorcher. It was really, really hot here in Florida and, of course, over in Texas. We're hitting record temps right now, which is unbelievable for this time of year. But I wanted to, first start off by saying that. And before we get into introducing our guest today, I wanted to talk about a couple things that have come up here recently for some of our insured, some of our policyholders in terms of claims. So we're recently finding that an amendment that was passed a couple months ago here, back in the most recent session, which lingered from the surprise session, the special session back at the end of 2022, has come into play, and insurers are taking advantage of it, and it kind of segues into what we're going to talk about today. But when there's loss or damage, I want to make sure that everybody knows, and there's a place that you guys can come in and understand what needs to happen when you notice your insurance company. Notice requirements are very, very important, and they are listed and described in your policy. But what we're finding is, when you need to call and notice the insurance company of loss or damage, it is important that you adhere to or follow two very important steps. One, you have to do it promptly. That's the language in the policy. Promptly can mean 2 days, 2 weeks, or 2 months. So I want to make sure that you guys understand that. Promptly means when you're ready at the end of the day, in our opinion. It doesn't mean to wait. It doesn't mean to take a long time, but it means to notice the insurer promptly when you're ready and do it properly. There's ways that we can help you here at GlobalPro, and that's something I think that you should give us a call about, just to make sure you're doing it properly for your association or for your home or anything that you have an insurable interest in. Second, when you do notice the insurance company, there was an amendment that now requires the carriers to send an adjuster or respond to a claim and notice of loss within 7 days. But the insurance companies, unfortunately, are full of gamesmanship, and they're gaming the system at this point. And what we're finding is that a lot of the times they're assigning an adjuster right away just to comply with the amendment, not in good faith, not to effectuate a prompt and efficient adjustment and then payment for the claim. What they're basically doing is they're assigning an IA, an independent adjuster, within 24 hours of your notice of loss. And they're sending the independent adjuster within 24 hours to, in my opinion, in our opinion, get the insured or whomever has suffered loss or damage, the policyholder association or business owner, kind of back on their heels, right? Most important, and we're going to talk about it a lot today, are those duties after a loss or your obligations after you suffer loss or damage. This is one of the most important aspects of your claim and is going to help ensure that you pursue and achieve a successful result. So with that being said, let me welcome today our guest. We have Robert Bowlby, the president of GlobalPro Texas, joining us today. I want to bring him onto the screen. Welcome, Roberto. How are you?
I am. There we go. I'm off mute. I am wonderful, sir. Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday. How was your 4th of July?
Let's start today.
What's that?
Hot.
Oh, no jacket. No jacket. It's hot.
It was hot. Yeah, I couldn't do the jacket today. We're trending anywhere between 100 and 109 degrees every day here in Texas. So wow. It's a hot one over here right now.
I bet. So tell me about your 4th then in general. How hot was it? What'd you guys do? Were you outside a bunch? Was the pool at least cool, enough to jump in?
Texas is a great place to spend the 4th of July because it's just such a patriotic state. And we did all the stuff you're supposed to do. There were parades. We did that in the morning. There were fireworks. There was a fireworks show that went way past 10. And then once we got home, our neighbors seemed to be doing a lot of fireworks that went way longer than that. So if you follow us on Instagram, you would have seen some video of the late night fireworks show our neighbors put on last night.
Amazing. So I'm sure the kids had a great time. So I'm really happy to hear that. And I actually had a chance to go up to New York and spend for the first time in a long time the 4th of July in the city. And where we have a place in the city, the actual Macy's fireworks barges, the actual procession there is right outside our window. So it was unbelievable. I haven't seen that in a long time. They haven't done on the East River in a long time, and it was a great sight. So I concur. I echo a lot of what you're saying. So going back to how I opened the show and what we have been talking about, you and I off screen, and certainly one of the most important aspects, in our opinion, for a successful recovery, and what we as representatives and advocates for our insureds handle and manage for them. let's talk about the duties after a loss. Let's talk about what you do right after loss or damage occurs, and how you keep in compliance and things like that for these policyholders and for loss or damage. In your opinion, I think you have a great kind of process, a great 5, 6, 7 steps that you need to go through after loss or damage occurs. You want to kind of highlight those, and we'll dig into some of them?
I sure can, and this has been top of mind because we've picked up a bunch of new claims, both residential and commercial, and many times we're engaged after the claim has already been filed. I'm going to talk about that in just a second, but those first few days of a claim, Matt, I might argue is the most important part in achieving a successful outcome. So we talked about filing the claim itself, and one thing that the carrier reminded me of on a recent claim, he said, the insured said this during the initial time when they reported the claim, and I've got the transcript of the call because we record all the calls. And I think a lot of insureds forget that whatever they say to the insurance company during that time they report the claim is going to be a matter of record. And, particularly with a lot of insureds, they're just, they're dealing with something that they don't deal with very often, perhaps have never dealt with before, and it's your personal property and you're really upset about it. So you're not always in the best frame of mind when you're reporting that claim. That's one of the reasons we always use our call us first tagline, because we know we will report the claim and not use any terms or provide any information that would prejudice the insurance company against paying the claim. So we always tell people call us first. That's one of the reasons. But the reality is many times we get involved in a claim after it's already been filed. Second thing I would say is take a lot of pictures and video. And people forget about that. I had a carrier tell me a couple weeks ago, well, we don't believe there's water on the floor because we have no photographic evidence of it. And while there's nothing in the policy or any policy that I've seen that says you have to have photographic evidence of the damage, they will try to use that to say, well, we've requested records of the damage and you can't provide them. So I always say take photos, take video. We always say if you're taking video, leave out the commentary in the video. But particularly if you have water coming out of a pipe or water coming out of a device, nothing shows that better than video showing it coming out of there. And if we don't come in until 3 or 5 days after the claim, or come in even after the mitigation company has been in there and done a lot of the work, we may not have the right photographic evidence. So we always say take photos and videos. We've got a Dropbox link you can upload them to. They can be very helpful as we negotiate the claim with the carrier going forward.
Let me jump in. Let me jump in real quick here, because this is something I mentioned in the opening here, which is very important. What they're doing on our side in Florida, just as a heads up for you, if the amendments are come to Texas, come to your neck of the woods, they're sending an IA out there, again, trying to catch the association or the homeowner or whomever on their heels. Mitigation is one of the most important things that needs to occur after loss or damage. And if they send someone out there within 24 hours, if it's a large enough loss, mitigation might just be getting started. Meaning they haven't made 2-foot flood cuts, they haven't ripped up flooring and carpets and things like that. Maybe they're just trying to dry everything out in that short time that the notice of loss went out and the independent adjuster was sent out. So they're getting there and they're doing exactly what you just said, unfortunately, which is the gamesmanship side of everything, which again is unfortunate and not in good faith, right? They're taking pictures of hallways and common areas where it might be soaking wet, but the picture doesn't show that. There's no drywall ripped out, there's no ripped up flooring, there's no tiles removed. Any of that stuff that normally goes into the mitigation hasn't started just yet, and they've caught them, unfortunately, I use the word caught on purpose, they've caught them kind of in the midst of doing all that. The problem then becomes, unfortunately, right, because that's disingenuous to use those pictures and say there's no damage at the end of the day. But the problem becomes those pictures get sent back to somebody at the insurance company, typically a desk adjuster and examiner, who's not there. They're not going to come to the property. They're not going to see the extent of the damage. They're just going to look at whatever's given to them by the independent adjuster or the field adjuster that's sent out. And when they don't show damage in those pictures, what do you think they're going to say? They're going to say exactly what you just said. We don't see anything. The extent of the damage or claim that you're presenting isn't supported by the pictures that we have. Again, disingenuous. It's not true, but unfortunately, that's how they defend themselves. Going back to the mitigation, which is very important. Getting back into what you were discussing, one of the biggest struggles we have right now is the method of mitigation, and we're finding that a lot of times, insurance companies defend themselves because the method of mitigation is quite, unfortunately, I hate to say this, right, is not congruent with the policy and what needs to be done, and that's a decision made by whomever is doing the mitigation, right? Typically, they'll pull baseboards, they'll put a bunch of holes, and they'll leave a bunch of machines running, and that's not good enough in most instances. And typically, it minimizes the actual claimage, the value and the extent of the damages. And that's just unfortunate how that comes about. But dig into that a little more, delve into that a little bit further, and talk about mitigation. What needs to happen? What the policyholder, the insured, or the association needs to do, and how quickly do they need to do that?
I sure can. And so first of all, just like lawyers and public adjusters, there's a ton of mitigation companies, and some are good and some are bad. And I always recommend that the insured choose their own mitigation company for a couple reasons. One, when the insurer chooses a mitigation company, it is likely two things have happened. One, the mitigation company has had to cut their profit margins as low as they could possibly cut them to be able to get that volume of work for the carrier. So they're not out there to do their very best work. They're out there to try to preserve as much profit as they can in a job where they're getting paid less because they're getting paid from the insurance company. And second of all, the insurance company may have just picked the cheapest mitigation company, which may or may not be the most experienced or best mitigation company. At least 3 times in the last 6 months, we've had to pull the insurance carrier's mitigation company off of the job because they've done a terrible job with the initial mitigation, and bring in our own mitigation company. And that leads to another battle you have to fight because the insurance company says, well, we don't want to pay for mitigation twice. Well, you had a terrible mitigation company came in that didn't do the work the first time. So what I recommend is you choose your own mitigation company and ask a couple of questions. One, are they familiar with the S500 protocols, and they're going to follow those, and they can cite that language when they do their mitigation because that will carry the day with the carrier. 2, make sure they photograph everything before and after the mitigation begins. And number 3, that they can write an estimate in an insurance company software. I call it Exactimate. That's what most of them use. But if they can provide that line item, it does 2 things. One, the insurance companies are used to looking at those types of estimates. And number 2, it helps us when we prepare the estimate, make sure that what they're paying the mitigation company for, we're not including in our estimate. So those are the 3 things I ask. And just, read the reviews, check ratings, make sure you get a really reputable mitigation company, because if they come in and do a bad job on the outset, that runs up the amount of the claim, and it's oftentimes hard to get paid for by the carrier.
I think another thing to think about also from an association or a property management perspective, when loss or damage occurs and you have to engage a mitigation company, remember, they're not licensed to adjust your claim. At the end of the day, there's specific licensing, there's specific bonding. In Florida specifically, it is against the law. It's written into the statute. They are not allowed to represent or advocate or even solicit or do anything in terms of adjusting the claim for the policyholder, for the insured. So I think Texas is pretty much similar in that regard, but I think the statute might be obviously different. But we're finding a lot. We're getting calls after 6, 7, 8 months where when I ask the association, I ask the property, who's been handling the claim? And they tell me it's the contractor or the mitigation company or whomever got to the property first. And again, in Florida specifically, that is illegal. Okay, so I want to make that very, very clear. The only licensed individual in the state of Florida specifically to adjust your claim are PAs or public adjusters. Licensed, bonded. It's not an easy task to get licensed and to understand how this job is done, how to represent and insure it properly. So there's reasons why behind it's so difficult, and that should be the difference maker at the end of the day. So Rob, what else did you want to kind of discuss today as far as this goes? The duties after a loss, I think we agree, are one of the most important steps and one of the most important things that policyholders have to comply with. So we've gotten through notice, we've gotten through mitigation. What else is important?
So let's talk about the policy. So first of all, if you don't have a full copy of your policy today, get it. Don't wait until you have a loss. It is one of the hardest and most frustrating parts of the process. And I've got 2 live examples I want to talk about. One, a claim we settled just a couple weeks ago, and we sent in, and the insured sent me their copy of the policy that their agent provided them, and we sent in our estimate and why cited the specific policy conditions. And the adjuster called me the day after he got my letter, and he said, Rob, I agree 100% with your letter, and I'm willing to pay the entire claim, but they don't have the endorsement you're citing. And I said, well, sir, I've requested a certified copy of the policy, but we don't have it yet, but send me what it is. And we dug into it, and we realized their agent had modified the policy when they added a pool into the property. And when he modified the policy, he removed the endorsement without the insured's knowledge. Now, fortunately, the carrier, the agent, and the adjuster talked, and the carrier ended up making it right and adding the endorsement back in and paying the claim. But I wonder without our involvement if that would have happened. Second example I've got, and this is one that is top of mind because I got this email last night, and I never name names on this show, but this is one of the top 5 largest carriers in the nation. We're now 2 weeks out. We don't have a certified copy of the policy, and requested it from the agent. The agent sent me the deck page and 3 endorsements, and he called it the certified copy of the policy. The adjuster emailed me last night and said, well, I've got it, but it's 70 pages, and each page came as a separate PDF, and I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to get it to you. And this is all we're doing is requesting for the insured to have a full copy of their policy so that we can understand the coverages, explain all of the coverages to the insured so that they can get the claim properly paid. And this, one of the 5 largest carriers in the nation, cannot provide us a copy of the policy. It is one of the most frustrating parts of it. And so I tell people, fight that battle now. Get a copy of the policy now. Don't wait until you have a loss.
Great point. And I every time I speak in front of a group, and folks can fact check me on this, I mention this point. I think you mention it all the time. Certainly Dan does. Anyone that you talk to at GlobalPro probably mentions this point. But in Florida specifically, to piggyback off what you're saying, by law they have to provide you one every year. So I always tell associations, their boards, and community association managers, listen, guys, once renewal happens, it probably takes 30, 40, 45 days or so. But you can request a certified copy of the policy and should put a recurring event on your calendar and do so every single year so you have it. You don't want to call around, especially after a hurricane or something catastrophic, and say, hey, I need the policy, right? Now, going back to your point before, I think it's very important to reemphasize what you said. Imagine that the insured that you were speaking about was not represented, and more specifically by you, right? Not represented by you and GlobalPro. Would they have ever been able to get through that whole issue with the endorsement and getting it changed and making sure that the insurance company complied with their obligations, that the agent had to get involved? I mean, that's a big lift. It's not an easy situation. And so, I want to reiterate and reemphasize, that's what we're here to do. Representation is important, right? I mean, we're here to manage your risk to recovery. That's our tagline, and that's what we're here to do. That claim probably would have resulted in just a plain denial. They wouldn't have explained to the insured what they needed to do. We know that, right? And
Yep.
It probably would have been dead at that point, unfortunately. But that doesn't obviate, right? It doesn't release them of their obligation to pay when it's a covered when it's covered loss or damage. And thankfully, you were there to help them out and walk them through that and get it corrected. So great story, great point. So after making sure that they have the policy, what other steps do you think they should take to ensure that again that they have a successful recovery when there's loss or damage?
Let's talk about 2 other coverages in the policy. Let's talk about contents and loss of use.
Great.
Contents, document your contents. I know particularly for some of our clients, some of our preferred service clients, we go in and take video of the HOA so you can see what all the personal property looks like. There are third parties that do that, and for the right type of claim, I think that's well worth it to do. That the third party will come in, they'll photograph all the contents. If they need to come out during the mitigation, they'll take them out and store them. They'll research the values of them. That's just something to look at. A lot of times, first of all, the carrier will never tell you those services are available, and those services are covered under your policy. And so a lot of times the insureds take it upon themselves to try to photograph everything, spend hours researching on the internet, trying to come up with values, trying to argue with the carrier. Most of the time, I won't say in every case, but most of the time we recommend just go to a third party and have them document it for you. You've got enough to worry about as the insured without trying to do that as well. And then the fourth thing is just loss of use. We're seeing more and more people use their properties as rental income, and just pay attention to that language. Because most policies have very specific language as to when it's covered and how it's calculated. You have to have a lease. In some cases, you have to have a 12-month rental history. In some cases, the property had to have been leased at the time of loss. If you were between tenants, you're not going to get covered for a loss of income. So just pay special attention to that language on loss of use.
Very, very important. A lot of the things we deal with, especially from a business owner perspective and from if there's rentals and the policyholders insureds that own a ton of property, especially in South Florida, loss of use or these time element coverages are very, very complex. It's not that easy. It's not as easy as people think to just go in and just say, hey, I lost this many days or this many weeks or this many months. Here's what my rent is, and this is what you owe me. It's not that easy. So that's something that we can certainly help with, and it needs to be documented. It needs to be correct. Sometimes there has to be accounting that goes back and digs into the exact cycle of rent, meaning there's high seasons and low seasons. There's all these things to contemplate when you're talking about time element coverages, and especially business interruption, loss of use, loss of income, loss of rent, things like that. So great points. So I think that pretty much covers everything. The only thing we didn't touch on today, which we'll get into maybe in another episode because we can dig in much further, is incurred expenses, right? We haven't talked about that. Extra expense, incurred expenses. There's all these different parts of the policy that provide coverage for everything else that kind of surrounds the loss and damage, and that has to be thought of and documented and properly reported and noticed to the carrier. But I want to thank you very much today, Rob, for the time. Glad you had a great 4th of July. We can't wait to see Dan and Susie and the kids come back. And the team here is ready, open, and available should any of you suffer loss or damage. Quick shout out before we close here. It was a dear friend of ours' birthday a couple days ago. He turned the big 55, so I want to say happy birthday to Vicky. We love you very much, my man. We're glad you're back from your trip and hope that you continue on your journey here with the triathlons. You're doing really, really well, and happy birthday, my man. Don't forget, follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all of these social media platforms. Stay up to date with information and news. You can always also follow us on our Storm Center at GlobalPro.com. And of course, if you should suffer loss or damage, always call us first. Call us at 855-487-7475. You can also email us 24/7, 365. We're available. Right? recover@globalpro.com. That's it for this week. Join us next week, same time, same GlobalPro channel. Ciao, ciao. Ci vediamo dopo. Ciao.